breakfast.
Good morning, and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason Mink. Today's topic, comic books. What can I say? Big surprise, huh? I love them. Can't get enough of them, in fact. I love reading them. In fact, I even love writing them. If you didn't know, I pen a little comic book called Storm Owl. Storm Owl features artwork by Eric Luna Salazar and appears every 3 months or so in the pages of Yeet Presents, the official publication of the old guys who like old comics. Now, I've talked about Yeet Presents before in Having a Drink with Mink. Cheers. And a few of you have suggested that I talk about it here on Comics for Breakfast. And while initially I thought that that'd be a bit of a conflict of interest, I realized, in fact, it's you that I'm writing the comic book for. In fact, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you all about Storm Owl right now. So what can I say? Let's get right to it. Storm Owl number 1 first appeared right here. And this is Yeet Presents number 26 with a cover date of March of 2019. This particular issue features artwork by Eric Luna Salazar and fantastic colors on the cover by Carrie Earl. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to promote this book at the Great Lakes Comic Con that year, and it was fantastic to meet up with some of you OGs and promote the book. So what's it all about? Let's get into it.
The year is 2080. It's midnight in the city of Carnelia. Two opportunistic fellows do a little bit of window shopping ahead of the Christmas rush. They smash the glass and make off with the goods, but the store's alarm has already sounded. The cops appear on the scene, but the perps flee in the opposite direction, losing them. However, before the thieves can celebrate their good luck, something heavy strikes the car. To their horror, a man has landed on the hood. With a slash of his heavy gauntlet, the car's windscreen shatters. One of the thieves discharges his gun at the figure, striking it in the shoulder. The figure flies from the hood, but the car has lost control and slams into a nearby bridge pylon. In a rain of burning gasoline, the Storm Owl rises into the restless night. Elsewhere, in an unnamed sanitarium, a grin-faced doctor strides through a psych ward. He stops in the cell of a man named Dwayne and apologizes for his absence. Dwayne appears to hallucinate one of his hands as a dark claw, but says little to the doctor's frustration. Later, in downtown Carnelia, a food shortage has led to rioting, with the vicious Bastard Squad dispatched to enforce order. Before anything can happen, the Storm Owl streaks in from above. Coming under fire, the winged vigilante flies straight into the heart of the squad, brutally dispatching the thuggish enforcers in a rain of gunfire. Seizing a soldier in the razored talons of his boots, Storm Owl uses his unwilling enemy as a bludgeon, dispatching another in his own unique fashion. Hey, Batman this guy ain't. Storm Owl takes to the air to regain his advantage, but a lucky shot from a squad member clips the winged figure. Dazed, Storm Owl ascends out of range, but inadvertently flies through the window of Lock Tower, to the surprise of its owner. Blacking out, Storm Owl recalls the events which brought him to this point. On the run, after some unrevealed discretion, teenagers George and Zoya flee the oppressive Night Watch. The kids have been chased into an abandoned industrial neighborhood, and their time seems to have run out. Foot soldiers spill onto the street. Injured, George slows, but Zoya spurs him on. The kids slip into a vacant building, struggling up the stairwell in the darkness, the Night Watch hot on their heels. The kids reach the top floor, but it seems like a dead end. In moments they are chased to the edge of the shadows. George is ready to stand and face his pursuers, but Zoya, unnerved, begins to cry. "Please," she says aloud. Inexplicably, a voice speaks. Her password has been accepted. The kids slip behind a moving wall, losing the night watch in the process. After a moment, the lights come on. The kids have stumbled into some sort of survival bunker, and a high-tech one to boot. They're informed that, for better or worse, the area has been locked down. And, just when it looks like their luck has changed, George collapses under the weight of his injuries. Prompted by his collapse, Zoya gives George what she hopes is a painkiller. Before we can see the results, George wakes up. He is in a strange place, greeted by a beautiful, scantily clad woman. After gently teasing him about talking in his sleep, the woman offers him a beverage and explains how he came to be here. George is shocked to find himself in Lock Tower in the presence of its affluent industrialist owner, Morgan Locke. Alarmed, George quickly dresses. A further wind is put under his tail feathers when he learns that the cops are on their way, and, after a few terse words, he leaves Morgan and flies off into the night. In the final panel, we discover that, while sleeping, Morgan has managed to scan the storm owl suit, much to her delight.
Eric had been working hard on the art, and Storm Owl number 2 appeared in Yeet Presents number 31 in October of 2019. This was the big Halloween issue, which featured a ton of creators. I'm not even going to try and name them here, because I'm sure I'll forget someone. I ain't going to piss anyone off, or I'll piss everyone off. That's the way I do it on Comics for Breakfast. The Storm Owl story right here features art by Eric Luna Salazar with a color cover by Carrie Earl, and it picks up pretty much where things left off. But for those of you just joining the story, well, we get a nice recap page as well. The story is told from Zoya's point of view in the form of a diary entry. George is late, returning from night patrol. An ill-looking Zoya gives up her vigil, heading back inside the area. She reflects on her friend and how wearing the Storm Owl suit has changed him. Able to see the world as George sees it thanks to the suit's sophisticated telepresence unit, Zoya witnesses the violence firsthand. In spite of his youth and inexperience, George fights like a squad of grown soldiers, unrelenting in his drive and fury. Having access to the suit only seems to have increased his violent tendencies, allowing him new and innovative methods of mayhem. But things were completely different only 6 months ago. Then, she and George were merely gifted children chosen to participate in a program at the Locke Bioindustries facility. Deep into the presentation, an alarm sounds, locking the facility down. The group is led back into a safe area, but are confronted by an unexpected sight. A small child, clearly the victim of some hideous experimentation, wanders over to the group. The guards step forward, but are flung aside by some mysterious unseen force. Feeling a bond with the abused child, Zoya steps forward. There's a moment of connection, a linking of these two beings without the exchange of a single word. Then, a stone-faced guard dispatches the child with a single shot to the back of the head. He then receives a directive and begins murdering the children to cover up the incident. Before she can react, Zoya is grabbed by the arm and dragged through a safety door by George. The two manage to escape the building, but the word is out, and their likenesses are soon everywhere. The kids are wanted for unspecified crimes, with a reward being offered for any information on their whereabouts. It's not long before they're trapped, but as we witnessed in the first issue, the kids find refuge in the abandoned Vonti industrial building. We learn that the injection Zoya gave George was experimental technology that essentially rewrote his nervous system. The kids discovered the Storm Owl suit, which the nanotech is meant to interface with. George realizes his natural athleticism and learned martial arts skills are augmented exponentially when wearing the suit, making him into a one-man army.
Motivated by a powerful moral compass and resentful of a world that seeks to imprison him, George begins using the suit in public, gaining the attention of the authorities. We break for news. It appears a mysterious virus is sweeping the population. Its effects are immediate and highly detrimental, leaving countless sick or dead. And now, just a quick point, folks. When I wrote this issue, this scenario was pure conjecture on my part. We had yet to see such a scenario occur in the real world, at least to this extent. This wasn't me trying to be topical or exploiting a very real crisis. This book was published well before our current circumstances. It's just the sort of weird and frankly awful coincidence that shows you that life will always be stranger than fiction. And now, back to our story. The sickness leads to an immediate humanitarian crisis, one the government is quick to exploit for its own gain. Access to the vaccine is used as a means to enact even more authoritarian control. Things appear to have reached a boiling point as a now frenzied populace descend upon a government storehouse containing the vaccine. It appears force will be used to protect the storehouse, but its guardians hadn't reckoned on the storm owl. Storm Owl swoops in and ventilates the front line of troops to the elation of the crowd. They cheer their new hero, but the forces of oppression still have weapons of their own. A tank draws a bead on the winged vigilante, but the shadowy figure is too quick and slips the scope. While recalibrating his sight, the tank's driver hears an odd sound, then hears nothing at all, as his head is blown into the stratosphere by a well-placed explosive. The troops open up with everything they've got, but Storm Owl fights on. He drops like a wall on the enemy front line, taking a rain of machine gun fire across the chest like it was flung popcorn. We get one of artist Eric Luna Salazar's delightful visual inventions, as our title character literally kicks his foes through the panel borders. But lest you think all of this wonderfully mindless violence wasn't in the service of the story, we see this was all simply to get Storm Owl close enough to place an explosive on the warehouse door. The detonation scatters the remaining troops, and the citizenry rush in to gather the life-saving medicine. And we learn that perhaps the people's new hero isn't so selfless after all, as he snatches a dose of the vaccine for himself and flies off. Storm Owl returns to the Eyrie, where we learn the medicine is for Zoya. He is immune to the sickness. However, he does succumb to the punishment of his recent battles, blacking out and collapsing on the floor. In the darkness, he and Zoya begin to heal.
February of 2020 saw issue 3 of Storm Owl, just in time for the Great Lakes Comic Con. It was a thrill to meet up with folks again and show them the latest issue, which circumstances forced me to color the cover. Came out all right.
We're back in the sanitarium where the doctor is grilling a now familiar patient. He asks Dwayne to go back to the beginning. Doing so allows us a better understanding of the present. The patient recounts his past. As the Storm Owl, Dwayne fought to protect his city from the forces that threatened to consume it. But the doctor demands he go back further, to Dwayne's childhood. Dwayne is reticent, but eventually relents, speaking of the past with his brother William. In spite of a modest upbringing, theirs was a fine life, at least until the incident. Burdened by the weight of memory, Dwayne goes into shock. With no more information forthcoming, we depart for the waterfront district. It's midnight, and Mr. DeVivier has arrived. The arms dealer is both prompt and ready to do business, and he's brought a new product in the form of the Wortham T7 assault rifle. And here's how you activate it. Oh, and make sure you prime it first. This will be important later. The gun makes a nice big boom, much to the delight of these potential customers, and it's looking like a sale, but the bid is sniped at the last moment by our feathery friend. Enraged, both the gang and the arms dealers begin firing at Storm Owl, who flies the gun up to a nearby rooftop. He drops the weapon out of reach of the criminals before swinging back into battle, but the device does not land unnoticed. Our winged protagonist engages the criminals, a terrifying specter to the uneducated men. One of them grabs an additional pulse rifle and takes aim, but doesn't prime the weapon first. The subsequent explosion blows a massive hole in both the dock and the fellow who fired it, sending a column of black smoke high into the air. Just then, 2 Night Watch copters arrive. The remaining criminals flee, Vivier in particular making his escape. Stormowl doubles back to where he dropped the gun, but, oops, doesn't seem to be there anymore. Unable to linger because of the Night Watch, he flees. However, had he lingered, he may have found his thief in the form of this feisty bearded gentleman. The old man makes his way down into the maze of dead-end streets and alleyways, putting the docks far behind him. In the anonymity of the shadowy alleyway, he studies his new prize. Remarkably, he seems to know more about the weapon than its previous owner, rattling off specs like a 1950s kid talking baseball. And hey, he's even smart enough to prime the thing. And that's dangerous, as we can plainly see. Meanwhile, Stormowl has returned to the Vaunty building. He enters the area through the secret rooftop entrance and drops into his lair. There, Zoya busily pecks away at the airy computer. They talk about the case. George is angry at himself, and Zoya tells him to lighten up. He doesn't mention the loss of this weapon, instead asking Z if there's any way to lock the helmet to prevent it from being removed against his will. Zoya shows off a new discovery in the form of an electrical discharge that can be expelled from the helmet fin. She appears to be enjoying this, but when George pressures her, it becomes clear she's throwing herself into this new life because, as a criminal, she no longer has a future. George, stricken, attempts to console her, but just then a radio bulletin breaks in about a disturbance downtown. George, knowing he's to blame, takes off. He quickly flies to the scene and confronts the aged shooter. Surprisingly, the older man is undaunted by Stormowl's unusual appearance. In fact, he seems pretty put out in general, if all the explosions are any indication. Stormowl pleads with the man to put the weapon down, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. And it's looking like it's going to be a long night. At the same time, across town at de Vivier's secret base, the arms dealer gets a ping back from one of his stolen weapons. He scrambles his team, himself taking the lead. The criminals' aircraft head out, beating the authorities to the scene. The old man is fired upon, saved at the last moment by Stormowl. However, the codger doesn't want to be saved by anyone and struggles, forcing Stormowl to crash into a window. Falling, he fires the pulse rifle again, clipping one of the aircraft and causing it to crash. At the same time, Stormowl circles the other ship, blasting away with his handguns. His weapons have no effect, and he struggles to find another way to bring the craft down. Luckily, he gets a little help in the form of the stolen pulse rifle, which cleaves the airship like a peach. The ship crashes in the center of town. At the same time, Stormowl petitions the old man to hear him out, if just for a moment. We learn the duffer's name is Rob Bob, and, surprisingly, Stormowl removes his mask in a bid to gain the man's trust. Rob Bob questions why he should give up the weapon. After all, it's the only protection he has in this world. It's not as if everyone else is going to give up their advantages. Why should he? Rob Bob explains at one time he was actually someone with power and status, but all that is gone now. This weapon may be his last best chance to get something, anything, out of life. Before more can be said, an injured but severely pissed off de Vivier appears, putting a gun to Rob Bob's head. He tells the men to drop their weapons, but while George complies, Rob Bob instead fights back. And what looks to be a three-way standoff quickly resolves in a brutal death for the arms dealer. George, desperate, pleads with Rob Bob. What will it take to get him to put down the gun? The answer is both unexpected and perhaps a little too easy for such a complex issue. But hey, I've got a page count to keep. Now uneasy allies, our hero watches over the sleeping Rob Bob, resting up for adventures yet to come.
So that's it. That's the first 3 issues of Stormowl. There are issues 4 and 5. We have them right here. And these are still available from Yeet Presents. Follow the link below. Make sure you get your copies. Hey, I hope this wasn't too much of a departure from our usual fare. We'll be back to old comics next week. If this particular episode intrigued you, you can still get issues of Storm Owl and a whole bunch of other stuff, like I said, at the link below. Be sure and check it out. Yeet Presents is the best monthly black and white anthology on the market today, featuring work from both professionals and talented young up-and-comers. Both myself and Eric Luna Salazar are thrilled to be in the company of such a cadre of cosmic creators. Thank you to Mike Jones for the hard work that he puts into every issue of Yeet Presents. But don't take my word for it. Get yourself a copy today. I'm Jason Mink, and I hope to see you next week at breakfast. Okay, that's it. So that's it.